Our club takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ali Giassi. I'm a director at the Canadian Club of Toronto and also its treasurer. Immigration has always been the path to a stronger, more innovative, and more resilient Canada. Today is no different. We're joined today by the Honourable Marco Mendicino for a discussion on how immigration will continue to drive the economy, help us recover from the impact of COVID-19, and build the Canada of the future. For so many of us who are children of immigrants, including the Minister himself, Canada's openness to immigration has had a profound impact on the country's history. Our approach to immigration fundamentally defines not just government policy, but reflects who we are and what we value as a nation and as a people. Before we dive into today's topic, here's some information about how to participate with us. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio quality should remain strong. Once you click the question tab, you can enter your questions in the window and they will be sent to the moderator. The request help button located in the bottom right corner of the page is for technical support. Thank you to today's event sponsor, EY Law. Thanks to their generous support, today's event was free of charge to all attendees. The Canadian Club is a not-profit, and we have been gathering people together for 124 years. It is because of our sponsors that we can continue to do that. We are grateful for your support of today's discussion. Minister, it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since we were in law school together. We've known each other long enough that I remember a time when I could just call you Marco. And it's wonderful to see the important contribution you are making to Prime Minister Trudeau's government. And so by way of introduction, the Honourable Marco Mendicino is Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. In this role, he works with his parliamentary colleagues to advance smart immigration policies that contribute to economic growth and reunite families. Minister Mendicino has also served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. The Minister also serves as MP for Eglinton Lawrence since 2015. Following the Minister's remarks, we'll be joined in conversation by Farah Nasser, anchor on Global News. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is the toast we make to our country, usually done in person with the raising of a glass. So let's make a nod towards the screen and toast to Canada. To Canada. Farah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As I put my drink down, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm looking forward, as I'm sure you are, hearing from the Minister Mendicino, to talk about the future of immigration, and not just the future of immigration, but the future of immigration at this unprecedented time we are living in. My name is Farah Nasser, as you heard. I am the anchor of Global News here in Toronto. And when I was first approached about this session, I was excited, and not just because I am halfway through my quarantine, coming to you from my bedroom, staying here away from my family, after coming back from the United States, covering the U.S. election, which was quite an experience, but also because immigration is so important to me. It's a topic that's very important to me. I am also, like the minister, I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came here from East Africa in the 70s. My father just retired last week, and at his big virtual retirement party, he was sharing some stories about what it was like when he came here with $35 in his pocket. He worked as a land surveyor for 2 weeks in Northern Ontario, and then didn't get paid after that, and came down to Toronto, tried to get some work. And, it's a story that I think mirrors many stories of immigrants, the sacrifices that they made. He taught my brother and I a lot about democracy, politics, civil society, and now we are both journalists. Probably not the doctors that my parents envisioned, but still journalists in jobs that we love, in a country that we love, and feel so lucky to be part of that, part of this country, the fabric of this great country. Now, this year has been different than most. I think you can all agree. As we offered each other New Year's greetings on January 1st, we had no idea what we were walking into. Social distancing, a world of masks, telecommunication, curbside pickup. I could go on. And, these types of Canadian club conferences have become the new normal, not the luncheons and the chicken and ballrooms that some of you are very used to. And while COVID-19 has changed our lives on a personal level, you can just imagine the impact it's had on Canada's immigration system, with border restrictions, with travel restrictions, border closures, I should say. And it's likely that this is not what our next guest had in mind when he was sworn in just about a year ago, to the day, in fact. Minister Mendicino has been the Member of Parliament for the riding of Eglinton Lawrence since 2015 and is currently the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Please help me in welcoming our guest, Minister, the Honourable Marco Mendicino.
Well, thank you very much, Farah. Bonjour tout le monde. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining today's conversation from the traditional territories of the Algonquin. I want to thank the Canadian Club for having me in. This is my second occasion, and in particular to my friend Ali. Yes, it's true, we studied together. I also recall us playing some football during law games, and I'm wondering if you still got that legendary quarterbacking arm. And we should find out at some point in the not too distant future, I hope. And to you, Farah, would you please pass on my congratulations and my gratitude to your father for his contributions to Canada? Because it's that story that I hope to weave into our discussion today, and one that I think many of us can relate to, the journey of our families and our loved ones from their countries of birth to Canada, and how that will contribute to our long-term prosperity. You're quite right, it is almost a year. It's not quite a year to the day. It will be a week today. November 20th was the day that I was sworn in as the Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. And I actually got this question yesterday during a press conference about whether or not it was everything that I envisioned. And certainly it has been that and more. And there were many things that we could not have predicted, including the pandemic, which has certainly turned many aspects of our lives upside down. And I'm going to address that. But one thing that has not changed, Farah, is our need for immigration. And what I have reflected on over time relates to an expression that I think some may know or have heard of. Demography is destiny, which I think from which we can derive an enduring lesson about immigration in Canada. It's no coincidence that our country's greatest eras of economic expansion, from the turn of the 20th century to the post-World War II boom, to the impressive growth of the past number of years, have coincided with significant immigration. And that's because when our population grows, our economy grows, and all Canadians benefit. We are indeed at a unique juncture in Canadian history. We're facing the challenge of our generation, and I'm confident that we will meet that moment. And before I move on to the substance of my remarks, I want to convey that I hope that each and every one of you are staying healthy, that your families are healthy, and that notwithstanding the difficult moment in which we currently find ourselves, that I can see a point on our horizon, not too far off, that will be better than it is right now. Our government has a proud record of building through immigration, from welcoming Syrian refugees to expanding family reunification to making it easier for the best and the brightest to choose Canada. These successes speak for themselves. Notre gouvernement s'est fièrement construit grâce à l'immigration. Qu'il s'agit d'accueillir plus de 25 000 réfugiés syriens, d'élargir le regroupement familial ou de faciliter le choix du Canada par les meilleurs talents et succès parlent d'eux-mêmes. However, the next few years will not be like the last few. And that's why I was very excited to recently table our annual immigration plan for 2021 to 2023, which I believe is the roadmap for the future. The key to both short-term economic recovery and long-term prosperity is immigration. And that's exactly why the Levels Plan lays out a vision to increase our numbers every year over the next 3 years. We aim to welcome 401, 411, and 421,000 new Canadians, respectively, between now and 2023, or in other terms, about 1% of our current domestic population. Travel restrictions and other constraints have led to a shortfall this year, which is why our plan increases immigration over the next 3 to make up for it. With nearly 60% of all new admissions in the economic class, our plan continues to focus on economic growth. Communities with the most immigration consistently see the fastest growth, which is why we're favoring community-based selection models to attract more newcomers to our smaller cities and rural regions, building on the success of our Atlantic immigration and rural and northern immigration pilot programs. Nous reconnaissons également l'importance d'accueillir les nouveaux arrivants d'expression française qui contribuent à la vitalité et au dynamisme de nos communautés francophones hors Québec. Nous l'avons présenté par des actions concrètes, nous le réitérons aujourd'hui. We also understand the importance of having families together, which is why we continue to support family reunification through various pathways and programs. It goes without saying 2020 has been a particularly challenging year. While travel has been restricted, we've provided exemptions for immediate family and have made it easier for them to be here for longer. And we recently extended those measures to ensure those with loved ones abroad can be together through this most challenging time. Finally, and importantly, we will continue to be the global leader in refugee resettlement, upholding Canadian values and maintaining our commitment to protecting the world's most vulnerable, thanks in large part to the generosity and compassion of Canadians. The UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, has, for the past 3 years, marked Canada as the world leader in refugee resettlement, which is something that all of us should be proud of. And it's not simply about the numbers that we are welcoming. It's how we so openly welcome them into our communities, as neighbors, as local business owners, and as aspiring individuals and families who add to the strong and social fabric of our towns and cities all across Canada. The past months have shown our system is capable of safe and orderly migration, even under difficult circumstances, and we continue to improve our system and welcome new Canadians. As our country was struck by COVID-19, newcomers have played an outsized role in our response, from taking care of our seniors to putting food on our tables. Omer Imtiaz, a personal support worker at John Gillis Memorial Lodge in Belfast, Prince Edward Island, said, quote, "I can never count my blessings enough for what Canada and its people have given to me." Omer came here in 2007, and he went on, and I quote, "This is my way of giving back to the community, giving to the most vulnerable." On Canada Day, this last one, I had the privilege of watching Omer become a Canadian citizen, alongside over healthcare and frontline heroes. And I will tell you that there is no other function that I enjoy more as the Minister for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship than getting to look those newcomers in the eye and welcoming them to our family of citizenship. Omar's story has been echoed across Canada. 1 in 4 healthcare workers are newcomers, nearly half of them in nursing, residential care, or home care. In many short-staffed facilities, asylum seekers care for those afflicted with COVID-19. Vulnerable themselves and without any formal status, Many have exemplified the Canadian values of caring for one another. And now these guardian angels have a pathway to permanent residency, thanks to a new initiative which I announced last August. Our healthcare heroes need reinforcements, and immigration will bring them. Maintenant, ces anges gardiens ont une voie vers la résidence permanente. Nos héros de la santé ont besoin de renforts. L'immigration apportera le soutien nécessaire. The pandemic has also reminded us of the contributions of migrant workers, from saving the lobster season in Nova Scotia to rescuing British Columbia's fruit harvest. In ways large and small, new Canadians are stepping up. Alexander Necht, who came to North Bay, Ontario from Germany, retooled his business to make face shields. Sarah Taher recently arrived from Egypt, sews masks and sells them at Fredericton's local market. A group of Chinese Canadian women in Montreal spent months making PPE for hospital workers. The contributions of immigrants, including filling the gaps that have existed before the pandemic in our workforce, are indispensable. As we rebuild our economy, they are essential. Immigration must be a pillar of Canada's post-pandemic economic recovery plan, said my friend Goldie Heyer, president of the Business Council of Canada. We agree, because immigration creates jobs. 1 in 3 businesses are owned by immigrants, creating tens of thousands of jobs from construction to retail. There are more than 600,000 self-employed immigrants, and more than 260,000 of them have paid employees. Recent studies have warned that a halt in immigration could cut economic growth by a third. As we focus on rebuilding our economy, we're also mindful of the long-term challenges facing Canada. Alors que nous nous concentrons sur la relance de notre économie, nous sommes également conscients des défis à long terme auxquels le Canada est confronté. Our workforce is aging rapidly. In 1971, there were roughly 7 workers for every retiree. Today, there are about 3. By 2035, there will only be 2 workers for every retiree. And at that alarming rate, Canadians will have to pay 40% more for the services like healthcare that we enjoy and need today. Thanks to immigration, our labor force continues to grow by a small amount every year. Since 2013, all net growth in the job market has come from immigrants. Put simply, we need more workers and immigration is the way to get there. In an era of restricted travel, we can make the most of the talent within our borders, seizing a unique opportunity to engage immigrants who are already there. They include the temporary workers, international students, and asylum seekers who are already putting their shoulder to the wheel. Their status may be temporary, but their contributions are lasting. Take international students, for example. International students bring so much to our institutions and communities, and we don't just want them to study here. We want them to consider staying and living here. And that's why we've also made it easier for international students with a study permit to stay in Canada, granting them more points to qualify as economic immigrants. I'm sure some of you may have heard of Apply Board. It was started here by 3 brothers, Nasi, Meti, and Martin Basiri, who came to Canada as international students. After coming here to study at the University of Waterloo, the Basiri brothers became permanent residents under our startup visa program. Apply Board has now helped over 100,000 students from around the world to apply to college and university here. It has more than 500 employees in 20 countries. And in just 5 short years, Apply Board has already reached unicorn status, which means it's worth over $1 billion. Our tech sector is booming thanks to immigration. We've already recruited 43,000 plus high-tech workers under our successful global skills strategy and are helping to launch 250 startups thanks to Canada's Startup Visa program. Les aspirants canadiens apportent les compétences dont notre économie a besoin. Finally, some of you may have seen that yesterday we announced new measures to allow people from Hong Kong to immigrate to Canada. For generations, aspiring Canadians have landed on our shores from Hong Kong and have made their mark on this country. One such person is Alan Lau. Alan arrived in Toronto from Hong Kong in the late 1980s to study engineering at the University of Toronto. After working for a couple of tech firms, he started Tira Wireless, a successful mobile gaming company. And a few years later, Alan got the idea for his second company and founded Wattpad, an innovative platform for writers to post their work and interact with readers. Today, Wattpad is valued at some $400 million and has 170 employees. It has over 65 million users around the world, revolutionizing the way writers interact with audiences. When we open our doors to people, we open our doors to prosperity, and we open our doors to the next Alan Lau. Canadians understand that in spite of the challenges of our pandemic, our immigration system is a competitive advantage that drives Canada's success. La hausse des niveaux d'immigration nous aidera à remédier aux problèmes démographiques qui continueront de nous affecter bien après la pandémie et définir nos intentions pour les années à venir. This will be a projet de société for our time. This is the choice we can make together for our country. It's the choice we should make now so that Canada's destiny is not constrained by our demographics. We're choosing to be open, vibrant, and prosperous. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you so much, Minister. And you spoke about Alan Lau's story. His is just incredible. So for those of you in the audience, you should read more about him and how he's also encouraging other people who were in his role. And on the citizenship ceremony, anyone watching, if you have not attended a citizenship ceremony, do yourself a favor and attend one. It'll be a day you won't forget, even if it's a virtual ceremony. It gives me goosebumps every time. All right, let's focus on first your levels plan. Maybe we could start, Minister. What categories make up this?
Well, there are three categories that make up our immigration levels plan. There is the economic category, the category that helps to reunite families, and then there's a category that is focused in a very dedicated way on refugee resettlement and the work that we do in the humanitarian space. And I'll take a step back and say that by putting an emphasis on economic immigration, we are really seeking to leverage new pathways for aspiring Canadians to come and propel our economic recovery. And so that is the general composite of our plan.
Okay, let's talk about, you mentioned domestic settlement or domestic immigration, but these levels are quite high. And some of your critics have said that they're maybe too high. So with the travel restrictions and the service disruptions that we have, how do you plan on meeting targets?
That's a really good question. And certainly to anybody who would ask, I would say the reason why we have set a bold and ambitious levels plan is because we believe that immigration creates jobs. As I mentioned in my remarks, 1 in 3 businesses is owned by an immigrant. They employ over 250,000 people. And so before I get into the how, let me just really emphasize that it is precisely because of some of the shortages in our economy, in our healthcare sector, as we confront this second wave. What we're seeing is that our frontline healthcare workers really need those reinforcements, and immigration is going to provide that second shift to meet the second wave. And how are we going to get there? Well, at every juncture where we have made a decision at the border, we have ensured that we are adding the resources that are necessary, both in terms of public health and public safety, to welcome newcomers in a safe and orderly fashion. I think our track record on that is very strong. But also, we have a unique opportunity to look at the immigration pool that is already in Canada. And by that, I mean 3 principal categories. One, our temporary workers, our international students, and our asylum seekers, many of whom have already put their shoulder to the wheel. And again, I'll come back to the healthcare sector. We have workers, students, and asylum seekers who are providing that critical support to our doctors, our nurses, and pharmacists who are going flat out so that Canadians can get the healthcare that they need. And I think Canadians get the concept that if people are here and they are already contributing, that it behooves us to look at ways in which we can accelerate their pathway to becoming permanent residents and ultimately Canadian. That will be good for our economy today, and it will also help address those long-term challenges that I described.
There was a recent poll that came out. It was a Nanos poll for Bloomberg News, and it talked about how the vast majority of Canadians don't feel like immigration levels should be increased over what they were. Some I know I've interviewed say that, why are we welcoming new immigrants when we have unemployment so high already here in this country? How do you address that?
I think by telling the story that you spoke about your father and just how that relates to people's lives. There's no question that I think the vast majority of Canadians do understand that immigration it reflects who we were as a country historically when you look back at lessons, but it also reflects who we are and who we want to be. So I think talking about these stories, reflecting on the positive narratives, whether it's the Alan Lowe's, whether it's many others like the Baziri brothers who have come and who have started companies like Apply Board to welcome international students, I think really reflecting and embracing that part of our DNA is one way in which we can, I think, remind ourselves that immigration is about prosperity. It is beneficial for our economy. And I think the numbers are actually dispositive of that debate as well. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is that nearly 1 out of every 2 workers in our food sector is an immigrant. 1 out of every 3 workers in the healthcare sector is an immigrant. 1 out of every 3 workers in our transportation sector is an immigrant. And so just imagine for a moment what it would be like to remove those components from those sectors. We would be weaker. And that's why I think the financial sector has said repeatedly, including many banks, if we slow down immigration, we slow down our economic growth. Now, we've got to do it in a very responsible way, and that's why I'm confident our Levels plan will help us get there.
You know, I'm in theory and philosophically, this makes sense. But when we look at somewhere like the States where I just was, and you see this divide in people, and you have 70 million people who voted for somebody who wants to put America first, right? So I know Canada is different, of course, but are you afraid of kind of a divide for people who are right now worried about their next paycheck, worried about their job, their employment, their family in this pandemic and the economic fallout of it, when you're saying, okay, well, we're now going to open the door and we're going to help all of these other people out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that question. I think it is important to be very clear-eyed about the moment that we currently find ourselves in, which is amidst a second wave in a once-in-a-century global pandemic. And, you know, federally, what we have tried to do is to step up and to be there for Canadians, for people, for families, and for businesses. And I think our record of support speaks volumes about how we are trying to get people across this very difficult moment. And we're not out of it. But I also think that we have an obligation to look beyond this moment and to plan for the future. And that's one of the things that our immigration plan does, is that it sets out a time frame through which we can achieve these goals in a manner that is safe and orderly and responsible to drive our economy going forward. So that is the challenge that is before us. And I think the way in which we instill public confidence in immigration is by being open about what those challenges are, but also reminding ourselves that we can be confident that immigration is a driver and that it will help us become a stronger country going forward.
You know, let's talk about the U.S. while we're there right now. And while I mentioned it, you know, the U.S. was #1 in resettling refugees. That changed about 3 years ago when we became the #1 when it came to resettlement. And I've covered a lot of stories about tech growth, for example, in Toronto, right? So let's just use that for a second. We saw so many people coming here, starting businesses, using their brain power to really elevate Canada's tech scene. But now that we have, you know, President-elect Biden in the States, we might not see that same level. So how will the U.S. election impact Canada?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, you know, it's not for me or anybody else in government to comment on U.S. elections, but we are committed to working with the next administration. And I do think it was encouraging that President-elect Biden's first call was to Prime Minister Trudeau. And I think it shines a light on the unique and special relationship between Canada and the United States. We share the longest unguarded border in the world, and we have many shared interests, including on the movement of people across international borders. So I think that when it comes to Canada's position regarding immigration, we'll take decisions that are on the basis of what is best for Canada. And that means being competitive. That means attracting the best and the brightest. And you mentioned the tech sector. We have a program called the Global Skills Strategy. I referred to it. We've welcomed over 40,000 highly skilled workers through the Global Skills Strategy, which was an innovation that was driven by our collaboration with the private sector. I think now, in this moment, we should be looking at that talent pool and asking ourselves, can we facilitate and accelerate your pathway to becoming a permanent residency? Because you are contributing to our recovery, and we want you to stay for the long haul. And we hope that your experience in Canada will encourage you to make that choice.
Now, how do we make sure in this time of economic uncertainty that you're setting up immigrants to succeed, whether it's the tech sector or anywhere else?
Yeah, also very important. And the OECD has repeatedly recognized that Canada is the top in class when it comes to the integration of newcomers into our society. And one of the main reasons for that, well, there are two, in fact. One is that we start the process of integration before the newcomer actually arrives in Canada. And through digital platforms and through working with our stakeholders right across civil society, regardless of sector, I'm seeing that whether you're a post-secondary institution or a prospective employer or one of our settlement service partners, that you are reaching out to to the prospective new Canadian and orienting them to their new communities prior to getting here. That's the first reason why we're very good at it. The second is, and I actually had the chance to talk about this, I was invited by Chancellor Merkel to talk about our immigration system at the beginning of March of 2020, before the whole world shut down effectively. And we talked about our express entry program. And we talked about how we've got a very agile system that allows us to be very selective in identifying that skill set and aligning it to our labor shortages. So we do have a system that I think is really the envy of the world. But I think at the same time, there are a few other things that we've got to continue to make progress on. One is navigating around the disruption that was caused by COVID-19. And I will tell you, COVID-19 has significantly disrupted immigration. There's no getting around that. But we have taken some lessons and we have made some progress. In addition to that, I think we also have to give the appropriate mandate and provide the necessary resources for our settlement service organizations so that they can do their job as newcomers arrive and get the language training, the orientation that they need to integrate. And I'm confident that we will be able to continue with that work going forward.
You alluded to this in your remarks, but I think it might be nice for our audience to get a better understanding of the new immigration pathways that relate to Hong Kong, the announcement you made yesterday.
Yeah, a very important announcement, and is obviously made against the backdrop of a very complicated and gravely concerning situation in Hong Kong. And one of the reasons why we made the announcement was certainly to stand in solidarity with the people of Hong Kong, with whom we hope they see an opportunity. And just to really recap the gist of the announcement, it will create new and expedited pathways for young Hong Kongers, recent graduates, within the last 5 years, 3 years and 5 years, depending on where you graduated, to come to Canada through a flexible open work permit and then to consider staying. And again, back to the point that I made earlier about needing those skill sets here to fill those shortages. The second thing it will do is it will promote existing immigration routes so that those who want to come to Canada from Hong Kong can do so. And third and finally, it does add some additional protections for in our asylum seeking system, which reflects the current state of the situation on the ground there. So this is an important announcement, but it is very much in line with our immigration levels plan. And our hope is that by putting it into place, we're going to be welcoming some of the new eligible Hong Kongers under that program as early as 2021.
Now, you said something very specific. You said the people of Hong Kong, the relationship between the people of Hong Kong. Are you worried about backlash from China, who thinks some of these people are violent criminals?
Well, as I said, we are gravely concerned about the situation in Hong Kong, Farah, and that's one of the reasons why we've taken strong measures. We've suspended our extradition treaty with Hong Kong. We have restricted the flow of goods to Hong Kong. We have revised our travel advice to Hong Kong. And so people should be very confident that Canada has taken a very principled and strong position when it comes to some of the actions taken by China, including the introduction of the national security law. And just to relate this back to one aspect of the announcement, no one seeking asylum from Hong Kong, or frankly anywhere for that matter, will be disqualified from making that claim by virtue alone of having been charged under the national security law. And that's one of the ways in which we are living up to that world-renowned reputation as having an asylum system that does defend human rights, that does ensure that we are offering a safe harbor for the world's most vulnerable and those that are persecuted. And we will always defend that position.
But what if China sees this as Canada getting involved in domestic affairs in a way?
we take decisions that are in the best interests of Canada. And this policy is very much in line with our immigration plan, which is focused on jobs, the economy, and long-term prosperity. And there is a synergy between looking at a part of the world that is rich in talent and experience and aligning those young Hong Kongers who may already be casting their eyes abroad and wondering whether or not Canada might be a place to build a better life. To them, we say, we hope you will avail yourselves of the opportunities in this policy.
There are so many audience questions to get to, but I'm going to end with one last one that I've been wondering for a while. How you mentioned attracting a lot of the newcomers to rural and northern areas. Can you expand on your plan and how you plan to do that? I mean, when people come here, a lot of them want to go into the cities where their families are, where they see a lot of prospects for work. So how do you convince them to go elsewhere?
Yeah, terrific question, Farah. And let me just be clear. Like I'm a Toronto city boy, and I'm shamelessly and unapologetically proud to be from Toronto. But if we never said another word about immigration, people would continue to pour into the big cities, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary. What we need to do is to distribute immigration a little more evenly across Canada, and these pilots will help us do that. So the rural and northern immigration pilot has selected 11 smaller towns from around Canada that are in rural Canada and northern Canada. And we are now starting to see people land through that pilot. And likewise, the Atlantic immigration pilot, where we've got a part of the country that is aging a little bit more quickly than everywhere else. I mean, we're aging rapidly in toto, but particularly in Atlantic Canada. And so it has been very encouraging to see the Atlantic premiers and frankly, the people of Atlantic Canada embrace the idea that we will drive prosperity and address those demographic challenges through an innovation like the Atlantic immigration pilot. So these are ways in which we can distribute immigration a little more evenly across the country, which will be good for all of us.
Okay. We have so many great questions. So thank you, all of you who are watching us right now who have sent in your questions. I'm going to start with this one. It was the first one we got in. We have seen an increase in anti-Asian racism since the appearance of the coronavirus. What is your government doing to combat racism against immigrants?
I've seen some of those reports and they're very alarming. And, you know, I will tell you, living in a diverse part of the country, it is extremely important to me on a personal level that we call out racism in all of its forms whenever we see it, whether that's overt racism, whether it's flagrant violence that stems from racism, or whether it's systemic. And I just want to pause for a moment to underline that we need to delineate the difference between the two. It is important as legislators, but equally across society, that we look at our institutions and we create spaces for people who experience racism to the table so that they can drive the kind of meaningful reforms that are necessary. And I will say, outside of immigration, as somebody who worked in the criminal justice system, I saw that play out through overrepresentation of Black Canadians and people of color and Indigenous peoples overrepresented in our jails. We need to make meaningful, lasting, systemic reform. So we have to call it out. We have to create the space that is necessary for those communities to drive meaningful reform. And that is especially true during the pandemic, when unfortunately, I think we have seen incidents rise around racism, and that is concerning.
Certainly. How will the Canadian government, this is another question, how will the Canadian government ascertain pay equity for immigrants?
Well, we do see, unfortunately, gaps between newcomers that arrive and Canadians. But what we also see, Farah, is that when we are calibrating our immigration system to make that alignment between the skills that are necessary with our labor shortages, that newcomers actually close that gap more quickly. And again, I would come back to the central premise that that's when immigration creates jobs. If we have an alignment between labor shortages and skills, then our economy recovers more quickly. We see greater growth, and by greater growth, we are driving long-term prosperity. I believe through innovations like the Express Entry program, which is a pathway to permanent residency, but equally through our international student program, our global skills strategy, that we have generally good alignment. And there are always ways in which we can improve that so that newcomers are actually very competitive when it comes to their wages.
Okay. This is an interesting one. Where did it go here? With the application processing halted and reduced for the year, was IRCC quick enough to adapt to the pandemic?
Look, I will tell you, I mean, we have learned many lessons over the course of the last 7 months. And the good news is that from where we were in March to where we are right now, we have made tremendous progress. And that's because we have invested the additional resources that are necessary, because we are leveraging technology and we are streamlining many of our policies. And I will say in several lines of business, we're actually going to be more efficient coming out of the pandemic. But there's no question we need to transform the way we do immigration in Canada. I mean, there may be a few folks who work in this sector who will tell you that our immigration system is still very paper-based, and I acknowledge that. And what I'd like to see, what I think my long-term vision for this portfolio and for our immigration system is that it becomes digital, that it becomes more touchless, that it becomes more seamless, that the many different steps that you have to achieve in order to come to Canada and land as a visitor or as a permanent resident will become more integrated. And I am driving that with all of the energy and enthusiasm that I know I'm sure many of our audience today would hope that I would be.
What will you do to enable more immigrant medical doctors to practice in Canada? We always hear there's, so many doctors that are here, but they can't practice because they're certified in other countries. And this person is saying that it's a hugely valuable resource, but currently a wasted resource.
And I agree. And I think one of the big national conversations that we've got to have is around foreign accreditation. And what I would say to the person that asked the question is that this is not something that can be just solved by the federal government. We can ensure that we've got a system that does seek to attract the workers that we need in our healthcare sector, but we also have to work in close collaboration with the provinces who are responsible for the day-to-day administration of healthcare in Canada, as well as all of the professional regulators, whether we're talking about doctors, nurses, or other professions and vocations. We need to, all of us, need to have an honest and candid conversation about how we can make foreign accreditation more competitive, more streamlined, so that people who arrive here are not being underemployed, underutilized. And I am very grateful for the question, because it's certainly one that I have been reflecting on a lot, particularly now as we need that second shift to fight the second wave of COVID-19.
So I guess maybe more specifically, though, is there a timeline? Is there a plan? Is there something, just because time, of course, is of the essence as we're seeing this second wave approaching?
The sooner the better. And so I will tell you that I think as part of the overall Build Back Better approach that our government is taking, and certainly in conjunction with people like my colleague, Minister Qualtrough, and all of our provincial colleagues, we are driving that conversation, and I certainly would hope to have to say more about it in the not too distant future.
Is the government looking to change PGP programs in order to let Canadians and permanent residents be able to sponsor their family without relying on the lottery system?
Yeah, PGP, for those who don't know, I'm sure most do, is the Parent and Grandparent Program. And it's a one-of-a-kind initiative around the world whereby people who are in Canada can sponsor in a very dedicated, through a very dedicated route, their parents and grandparents. Far and away, one of the most popular initiatives in our immigration plan. And just to be clear, we've set an ambitious goal to welcome 40,000, or to process 40,000, I should say, over the next 2 years under that particular pathway. There are many different perspectives on how we should invite people to express interest. Last year, we had a first in, first out expression of interest, and the door was open, and it was then quickly shut within about 15 minutes because we'd hit the cap for the year. This year, we left open the intake period for about 3 weeks to level the playing field so that people who didn't have access or who had reduced access to internet, and those who were members of the disabled community, which was a real challenge last year, had a fair opportunity to express their interest to participate in the PGP program. I'm open to receiving additional feedback. I'm open to reforming it going forward. But the key point to take away for the person who asked the question is that no government has done more to reunite families than this one when it comes to immigration, and I'm very proud of that.
There are some who, I know that you've had some protests outside your constituency office, like some who are saying that they've been waiting as much as 6 years to reunite spouses. So what's the situation there?
Well, first and foremost, that we hear them. I have had the occasion to see and to interact with, people who have been impacted by COVID-19, and it's tough. I mean, I will tell you, it is challenging, and it is at times heart-wrenching, and I wish there was a way to wave a magic wand. But the reality is that we are doing everything in our power to accelerate those processing times to not only to get back to where we were pre-COVID, but to accelerate and even exceed those service standards going forward. And that's where I think some of the leaps that we're making with technology will help us achieve that. And to anybody who is still waiting, I would say to them, keep faith. We are going to get you here as quickly as we can, but we have to do it in a way that is safe and orderly and that protects the safety and security of all Canadians.
A question just came in, and I think it's an interesting one. How do you intend to manage the current housing supply challenges in Toronto, and then, of course, we know in other big cities and other major cities, based on the immigration numbers that you've outlined in your plan? Because we know in some of these cities, housing is a big issue.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that my colleague, Minister Hussein, who was my predecessor in this job, but now occupies the portfolio that is responsible for driving housing reform in Canada, doesn't mind that I steal a bit of his thunder, and quite proudly. I'm sure he would be happy that I'm speaking about initiatives like the National Housing Strategy, which seeks to eliminate or reduce, homelessness by half right across the country. In addition to that, the additional investments that we're making in rapid housing, over 1.5 or 1.8 billion dollars, I think, that is dedicated to setting up housing so that people have additional options. And again, living in a big city like Toronto, I am acutely aware of how hard it is to get into the housing market. I speak to my friend Mayor John Tory about this all the time, and I think he would tell you and has said that in the federal government they have a very strong and reliable partner. And this, of course, is completely in lockstep with our choices around immigration, which is to drive growth. And as they arrive, we are building up that additional capacity in housing so that not only newcomers, but Canadians also need access to affordable housing, and we are making significant strides and progress on that front.
Okay. Will there be new programs to allow students and workers who are in Canada to obtain permanent residence? I know you spoke about that a little bit earlier, but maybe you can delve into the new programs that are coming up.
Well, I'm excited about looking at the pool that we've got, the talent pool that we've got in Canada, and that does include temporary workers and international students and some asylum seekers. You heard me mention the Guardian Angels. Just on that front, I mean, this was a very unique policy which we set up. Some of the audience may recall that there were a number of asylum seekers whose status was not yet determined. They don't have their papers, and they were rolling up their sleeves, and they were working in the on the front lines of the hospitals in the CHSLD, which are the long-term homes in Quebec, and we created a pathway for them to become permanent residents. I think we can take that principle and we can look at ways of applying it in the broader pool of temporary workers and international students. And in fact, we already have a precedent for doing that. There are already workers and students, international students, who transition. Why should we consider accelerating and broadening that pathway right now? Well, precisely because our borders remain closed. And until we are at a moment where we can welcome newcomers, it behooves us to really look within and see whether or not people who are already contributing in our response to COVID-19 might not become permanent residents and Canadians more quickly. That will help accelerate our economic recovery, and it will also grow our population so that we can stabilize and protect those long-term covenants like healthcare, public education, retirement security. We all cherish that. I mean, those are all the sine qua non of Canadian life. But unless we grow our population, those things that have become so fundamental to our experience will become a lot more burdensome on each and every one of us. So immigration can help, and domestic temporary immigration, I think, is one way in which we can get there.
Are there any benefits for that employers can access when it comes to hiring newcomers?
Well, I think certainly there are benefits that we have made eligible for those immigrants and newcomers who are here in Canada. they're the same rules that would apply. So for example, under the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which was a real, like a transformational lifesaver in the early days of the first wave of the pandemic, we ensured that newcomers who were here, who met the same criteria, the same threshold, in other words, they had to play by the same rules as everybody else, could get access to those benefits. And that is important because we also want to be sure that they are not also posing an additional strain and burden on the rest of us and on the economy. So as we chart out the course through the second wave and look to build back better, it is important that we do provide supports for newcomers and temporary immigrants who are here. And I think we have a good, strong track record in doing that.
So nothing specific, though, for the employers or the people who are hiring them?
Well, I would say that the many supports that we put into place for business, whether it's the business account loan, whether it's the wage subsidy. And by the way, that's another example where if you're an employer and you are employing a newcomer or an immigrant, your ability to keep them on the payroll is going to be mitigated by the wage subsidy. So I do think we put a lens on providing support to business that is flexible enough and that doesn't create any impediments or unintended consequences and barriers to providing those employment opportunities for newcomers and immigrants who are filling those gaps, which is what will help us to drive our recovery.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to end on a positive note. Can you share, someone wrote this into us, and I think it's a good one. Can you share with us some of your favorite immigrant-run businesses in Canada? You've already shared some, but we'd love to hear your thoughts because you obviously have access to so many in terms of what you're hearing. And this person says that we want to support our newcomers.
Okay, well, this is going to disclose a bias. I love chocolate, but Peace by Chocolate out east in the Maritimes is far and away, is just one of the most inspiring stories. And by now, you've all heard the story about Tarek Haddad, but I don't know why I raise it. I mean, I do like chocolate, but I got to welcome Tarek as a new citizen. And, just to see the emotion in his eyes, to see how hard it was for him to get here, and to see that now, not only has he been able to bring his family and sponsor his family here in a part of Canada that, you would not necessarily think, people tend to think, okay, big cities, but not Antigonish. It was something special. And I think that, the many success stories, and not just Tarek, but Apply Board and, the many other business owners that I have met, and not just ones recently, but in my own riding are truly inspirational. I think just to come back to, why it is that we are here talking about immigration. We're talking about it, yes, because it will drive our economy forward, but also because it reflects who we are. And I think that is what gives me great hope and optimism and confidence when I think about the future of Canada, which lies very much through immigration. So those are, I gave you a bit of my personal bias and a little bit more about how that all fits into the work that I get to do as the Minister for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship.
I'm curious, though, do you see any industries that are experiencing a lot of growth because of, the knowledge base that's being brought from outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tech industry for sure is one in which we will see an ongoing boom. And I think our announcement yesterday, where we can leverage the skill set that is there in Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is not only a financial hub, it's also a tech hub. And we can, I think, continue to drive that growth of the tech boom by creating a Silicon Valley North, by inducing, enticing, inviting that population to come to Canada.
Great. Well, of course, we are all going to be looking forward to what happens in Canada after this pandemic. Once, all of this is behind us, everyone's kind of looking forward. And I know there's a lot of COVID fatigue out there, but there is certainly hope. So thank you very much for bringing some of that hope to us today and answering some of the more difficult questions we had there. Appreciate your time, Minister. Ali, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, Farah. And Minister Mendicino, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your insights on Canada's renewed immigration plan. Your remarks have reminded us that demographics is indeed destiny, and Canada's immigration policy will be a critical element in helping us fulfill our full potential as a country. At a time when many other Western nations are looking inward and backing away from welcoming newcomers, Canada's more open and balanced approach focuses on the need for economic prosperity while continuing our commitment to family unification. So thanks, Minister, for all you do, and we wish you all the best as you implement this ambitious plan. And to Farah, we really appreciate your guidance of the conversation and hope you'll join us again. We hope you'll join us for some of our upcoming events. On Wednesday, November 18th, we're hosting Kaylin Ravanescu, President and CEO of Air Canada, in conversation with BNN's Amanda Lang. And the following day, Thursday, November 19th, we'll be joined by powerhouse panel of female politicians, including former Prime Minister Kim Campbell, leader of the Green Party Annamie Paul, and the Honourable Bardish Chagar, Minister of Diversity, Inclusion and Youth. You won't want to miss it. Thank you again to EY Law for sponsoring today's event. Our events would not be possible without our sponsors, so thank you for your continued generosity. And thank you also to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca, for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Please stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful weekend.